First, the headlines. It's not every day that the academic ivory tower of Harvard offers bad news for the Biden administration. But amazingly, a recent poll by Harvard's Center for American Political Studies found that a whopping 58% of Americans, when asked if they would favor or oppose a $1.5 to $2 trillion social spending bill that would be financed by increasing the deficit and tax increases, opposed the costly measure. This, in addition to the bill's anti-family policies and trillions upon trillions of dollars in spending. Well, Congressman August Pfluger is here to highlight some of the concerns he has with the bill. Congressman, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Joseph, thank you for having me today.
Well, so glad to have you. You've been tracking this bill. From your perspective, what are your concerns?
Well, how long do we have? Because the concerns are just incredibly long. You know, when you dive into this bill, which the famous quote from Nancy Pelosi was that we have to pass it in order to find out what's in it. Well, that's unacceptable when you're talking about literally thousands of pages. I mean, just last night, they introduced over 400 pages of new text in the Rules Committee. And the most concerning thing that I see with this is the narrative that it's not going to cost Americans anything. It is going to cost every American many things. When you look at the prices that we are facing right now at the pump, in the grocery store, everyday goods, it's going to be the most expensive Thanksgiving on record. This bill will make that a permanent expense that we are going to see for years to come because we've got $1.3 trillion in new taxes. And they say that it's not going to affect people that make less than $400,000. Well, that's just not true. One of the things that I'm most concerned about, because I represent the Permian Basin, I represent rural Texas, where we produce an amazing amount of energy for this country, is that they are adding taxes to our energy producers. Every American is going to feel that. It's going to hit us in our Main Street businesses. It's going to hit us in the trucking industry. It's going to hit us as we go to the pump and we fill up our cars. And as an offset, what they're looking to do is have a handout for people who buy electric vehicles. It just doesn't make sense right now. We're going to see a major energy crisis, and it's already developed in Europe. It's going to hit our shores eventually. But this is something that every American should be very worried about, is that the Biden administration is not unleashing the innovation of private industry, of private entrepreneurs. They are actually stifling it with an overregulated posture that's going to continue to hurt our economy and hurt our pocketbooks.
I think one of the reasons the administration continues with this line that it's not going to cost anything is because they have information similar to what that Harvard poll found, that 58% of Americans are opposed to a major spending plan when they understand that it is going to cost people something. You can't spend trillions of dollars and have it cost nothing from someone. They're taking it from the American economy, from the American people somewhere. Now, in addition to that, though, the Republican Study Committee has published a list of issues that they're concerned about. And there are some things here that are interesting and concerning, and I'm hoping you can illuminate a little bit more for us. Recently, this week, the negotiations have been about price controls for prescription drugs. Why is that a concern?
Well, I mean, it's one of many concerns. And before I address that, let me just say that Jim Banks and the Republican Study Committee is doing a wonderful job highlighting these issues and illustrating just how dangerous this bill is. And one of the issues we brought forward this week is that the Congressional Budget Office, per House rules, per the Speaker of the House's own rules, has to score a bill before it's voted on. And that has not happened. And the American public deserves to know what the impact is going to be fiscally. When you look at prescription drugs, when you look at any other aspect of this bill, we want to know that there's a transparent and competitive process that's going on in our free market system. And so I think you can apply that across the board. The RSC has done a really good job of highlighting those issues. And I hope they continue to do that, to tell us why these things are bad, where consumers are going to be paying and overpaying in a lot of cases without knowledge of what that transparency is. And I think that's really at the heart of the matter for the prescription drug issue.
Now, you mentioned earlier Nancy Pelosi's now infamous quote, "We have to pass it to find out what's in it." And of course, at that moment, she was referring to Obamacare. Are they taking a similar strategy and hoping that the outcome is the same? We're going to pass something that people don't know anything about and might not be excited about, but it's the only way to get it through. Is that the approach here?
It sure appears that way, and we're looking at history and making sure that that we can play good defense by going on the offensive. And I think if there's a bright spot, it was Tuesday night, where all across the country, especially here, right next to the nation's capital in the state of Virginia, voters came to the polls and they said, enough is enough. If you're not going to be transparent at the state level, at the county level, and certainly at the school board level, then we are going to vote people in who are going to be transparent, and they are going to give us the real information and tell us what's in the proposed legislation. And that's what people are so upset about. Enough is what America said on Tuesday night. And I sure hope that we learn those lessons, that we go forward and we hold everyone accountable for decisions that are being made. And us as lawmakers, with my background in the military, it's so important that trust is part of what this country was built on and that our institutions have trust. And I think Congress as a whole, there's such a low level of trust. And it's because of this, the Speaker of the House bringing a multi-thousand-page bill to the floor and not being able to communicate what's inside it, that's anti-American. It's anti what our framers intended for this process to be.
Another provision that is getting attention is the apparent removal of language that prohibited funds from being used or grants being given in places that would use forced labor of the Uyghur Muslims in China. Of course, that's an incident that's received national attention because of the human rights abuses. This bill previously had language saying, we're not going to give money to anybody who's exploiting the Uyghur Muslims. Any insight into why that language has been removed?
Well, I don't know the motivation why it's removed, but I think it goes to accountability. As a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I've taken part in many conversations and proposed legislation and amendments that would hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for their persecution. And I think genocide is a word that should be used to figure out what is going on and how these Uyghur Muslims are being persecuted. When I was able to speak to a survivor, a Uyghur Muslim female who had the courage to come forward, her story was heartbreaking. Her courage was so inspiring. So why Nancy Pelosi would remove this from the language is beyond any comprehension, because the CCP must be held accountable for atrocities at this level.
It is concerning, and I think we would expect that not supporting genocides is a bipartisan issue, and I think for the most part it is, which is why it's such a strange development that appears to have been removed from the most recent draft of this legislation. Another issue, $2.5 billion set aside for a fund designed to do, among other things, advance tree equity. Any insight into what tree equity is?
Well, this goes into the category of you can't make that up. And when it comes to these different pots of money, I think, no, I don't have insight as to what that would go towards. But is anyone in America against trees? Of course not. We definitely want this planet to be left in a better shape than we inherited it, to the next generation, to gain a planet that's going to have sustainability. But listen, the power of the purse strings is a legislative authority. And one of our concerns in a conservative mindset is that the executive branch gets these pots of money, which gives them the power to then just dole out that money to whoever they want with very little accountability. And we're trying to take that back. The legislative branch, as a co-equal branch of government, needs to take that back. The authority needs to be here. And if there are different programs that are not in line with that, and the accountability isn't what it should be. And I think the point of this is maybe this is a good program, but probably it's not. And we need the accountability. We need to understand where it's going to go, what it's going to be used for, and how it's going to benefit the American taxpayer.
Now, shifting gears on you just a little bit, the Biden administration has finally released its long-awaited OSHA guidelines about their vaccine mandate. Now that we have the details, what's your reaction?
Well, I think what you're seeing is they understand just how damaging and how overreaching the initial guidance was. This morning, I spoke with employees in a manufacturing company in my district who are extremely concerned with the mandate and have very good reasons as to why they don't want to take the vaccine. Now, look, I'm vaccinated. It was right for me, but I don't think it's right for anybody in government to then tell somebody that they need to go take this. That's something between them and their doctor. And so, I think what you see with this latest round is that the deadline has now been moved back another 2 months into January, so January 4th. And it also offers more flexibility. So you're not going to lose your job if you don't take the vaccine, if you can then comply with wearing a mask or being socially distanced or maybe testing every week. And so I think they've realized, like they saw on Tuesday, the Democrat Party is seeing the outcry all across America that they don't want a mandated, overregulated posture. And that is so dangerous for our country. And they have walked it back and are trying to save face. My hope is that we can get rid of it completely. And that's what I pushed for by hoping to get a congressional review action to overturn the executive order.
I think you might be right that in some ways the American people have called the bluff of the Biden administration and said, we don't want this to happen. What are you going to do about it? Do you actually mean what you say? And it appears the Biden administration may not have actually meant what they said, which of course would be a good thing, but there's much more on that. But for now, Congressman Pfluger, really appreciate your time being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.